It took me 5 years lifting in the gym to learn what I'm about to explain to you in this video. From the beginning, I went through the trials and tribulations of trying everything I learned online, failing over and over again, just smashing my head against the wall and hoping that something would work. And I would just constantly hit plateaus and just not make the progress I wanted. So the first lesson that's really important to learn is that you're not building muscle if you're not progressing. Progressive overload is literally the number one driver of hypertrophy. If you're not moving up in weight and getting stronger in a moderate rep range, just know that you're not putting on muscle. And if you are in the short term, it's not going to last long term because you're not going to be able to maintain the stimulus on your muscle. And at some point, the weight's just not going to be enough for you to keep growing. You need to constantly be pushing yourself harder and harder every workout, whether that be another rep or a better rep at the end of your set. It has to be something measurable. And that's why it's so important to track your progress, because progress is literally the most important part of your training. And if you're not actively trying to achieve progressive overload, then you're not going to be gaining a reasonable amount of muscle, even if you're working out super often and pushing yourself hard. Now, the next lesson I learned that is really important is that if you're training with high intensity, you cannot also train with high volume or high frequency. Basically, all these three variables in terms of natural training, you need to have them balanced as much as possible for your level of recovery. So for me personally, especially because nowadays I don't like being in a bulk all the time, but even when you're in a bulk, you need to realize that our perception of recovery is so skewed nowadays because we're so used to seeing all these people getting away with really high volumes, really high intensity, and really high frequency because they're all on steroids. There's so many people making programs out there that'll tell you you can get away with all these things, and the only reason they're making progress and recovering is because they have PEDs helping them. I learned this way too late in my training, but basically I was training with really high intensity, which is what I always did, but I also had pretty high volume, and I was training pretty much 6 days a week. And the problem was I didn't allow myself time between workouts to really let my muscles as well as my central nervous system recover fully. The problem with that is that if you're not fully recovered going into your workouts as a natural and you're trying to achieve progressive overload, you're not going to be able to keep progressing long term, because if you just push yourself really hard one workout and then you go into your next workout without being fully recovered, you're not going to be able to push yourself to get that extra rep or be able to really stimulate that muscle growth. And again, like I said, if you're not progressing, you're not growing. That's why as soon as I switched to lower volume, lower frequency, allowing for more rest days, but keeping my intensity high and training pretty much to failure as much as I can, it basically made sure that I was stimulating enough muscle growth with mechanical tension, as well as leaving my body enough time to recover so that the next time I would go in, I could actually progress and hit PRs. And not only was that way more fun because I wasn't just going up in weight and stalling every time, but it was also way more productive because I was spending less time in the gym and also making more gains. So it was literally just a win-win all around the board, and I wish I had done it way sooner. And guys, if you're curious how I train now and you want to know all the knowledge I have on optimal training, I made you guys a free optimal training blueprint. It's the first link in the description, and it's really going to help you guys out with learning how to train optimally as a natural and make long-term progression. Again, it's completely free, so you should check it out. Now, the next big tip that I'm going to tell you is that you need to be picking exercises that are actually letting your target muscle fail, as opposed to other muscles in the exercise that should just be assisting. So my example for this is that I am really built well for squats. I have short femurs and a long torso, so I can stay really upright in my squat. However, when I got really strong at squatting, at some point I got up to a 405 squat. And once I got to that 405 squat, I realized that my quads had not grown as much as I wanted to, but at the same time, my glutes got really big, and my legs really didn't have much to show for having a 405 squat. And this is a perfect example of different exercises being good for different things. So the squat was really good. If I got really strong at my squat, it grew my glutes like crazy. But that is not what I wanted to be growing. I wanted to be growing my legs. So instead, if I just spent my time getting really strong at like a low foot position leg press or something that really targeted my quads and allowed them to fail before anything else, that would actually allow me to put the most mechanical tension on that target muscle and allow it to train close to failure. And that's what actually drives hypertrophy. So if you can find exercises that bring the target muscle close to failure and then you get strong at that exercise, you'll be set for making hypertrophy gains for the longest time. So my next point has to do with diet. Basically, I understand that on a fundamental level, calories in, calories out is really the only way to think about your diet. If you eat above your maintenance calories, you're going to put on weight, whether that be fat, muscle, whatever. And if you eat under your maintenance, you're going to be losing weight, whether that also be fat or muscle. But more specifically on this topic is that if you want to get bigger and put on muscle, you do not need a huge surplus, because you're going to be putting on way more fat than muscle, and it's not worth it because you're going to have to cut after, and it's going to be difficult. If you were to just stay in a really small surplus, like 200 calories, that is really going to make sure that most of the weight you gain is muscle. And the same goes for the other side of the spectrum. If you're on a cut, you don't want to be cutting super quick, because you're going to lose more muscle than you want. You're also going to get way hungrier, your metabolism is going to crash more, and you're going to get to a point where you're barely eating anything and you're still not losing weight, and you're going to plateau. So either side, you want to make sure it's controlled and you're actually tracking your calories if you're doing these methods. Basically, in terms of your diet, if you can make it as easy as you can to stick to and make sure that it's satiating and you feel full, that's all you need to know about diet. It's calories in, calories out. Make sure you can sustain it, and that's all you need to know. And my last point is probably the most important point. The only way for you to fail in fitness is to give up, because as long as you stay consistent long term, you can basically be training like shit the whole time, and you'll still make a reasonable amount of progress. It just might take you a lot longer if you really don't know what you're doing, obviously. But I trust that most people are not stupid, and they're not just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, even if it's not working. In the process, you'll learn what works and what doesn't, and you'll throw away what doesn't. And you're going to be doing this process over and over again till you get to a point where you're doing something that really works for your body. And literally the only way you cannot achieve a decent physique is just if you give up, if you stop working out, if you stop being consistent. And a lot of this comes down to your expectations and going into this. You need to realize that it takes time to get a good physique, and you shouldn't set a time span on how long you want it to take. The mindset you should have in terms of time frame is just as long as it takes. Basically, have that big goal, have that dream physique, work towards it every day with small, daily actionable steps. Eat healthier, go to the gym more, train hard, make sure your program is optimal. And if you're doing all these things, just let the rest happen naturally. Have that big goal, but focus on the present moment, because if you start looking too far ahead and realizing how far you still have to go, and you have really high expectations, you're just going to give up, because it doesn't feel good if you're doing that. You need to enjoy the process, and a lot of that comes down to just looking at the small wins and realizing you're making progress. Thanks for watching.